Wow, thank you, Don. I appreciate it very much. Thank you for the nice introduction. And it's an honor to be here with all of you tonight. And thank you, UJA Federation and the team and all the event chairs. Thank you, Allison, and to Lee, who meticulously organized this event this evening. And I deliberately use the word meticulously because she told me I have between 7:47 and 8:02 to speak. So I promised Lee we're right on time and I should even beat the clock. I'd also like to thank Ellen Banner, too, who I understand is here, who thank you for all you do to help and continue the support of the UJA. I'm very grateful to be speaking at the Stephen Banner Corporate Council event, honoring your husband and all of his incredible gifts and accomplishments. Through his brilliance and clearly tremendous devotion to the Jewish community, Stephen continues to serve as an inspiration to all of us here tonight. So thank you very much. So I'm pleased to and honored to be recognizing my colleague and good friend, Eric Grossman. I have had the privilege to work with Eric for almost a decade. And lucky for me, his office is less than 30 feet from mine. And trust me, he has a much bigger office and a better view. I'm told that Eric, actually, from his brother, I told Eric started his career as a young teenager working at his grandfather's clothing store in the South Bronx. The store, which he told me was called Siru, which actually was the name of both his grandfather, Seymour, and his grandmother, Ruth. He also told me that Eric would travel to the flea markets with his grandparents all throughout the Bronx, selling women's clothes. Eric, it looks like you've come a long way from selling women's undergarments to being honored in the ballroom of the Pierre. My connection with the UJA is long-standing, one that dates back actually to my parents and grandparents. I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, the youngest of 8 kids. Trust me, there were not many Jews in Duluth, and no one had 8 kids. I know most of you are thinking there's no way that guy is Jewish, but I am. In fact, my dad was a UJA president, and he chaired several of these dinners. My mom was the head of ADASA and worked for the UJA. I remember it as it was like yesterday. My father coming home from a UJA dinner and saying, "Thomas, can you believe that Sam Schwartz guy? That big macher stood up and gave $2,000 at the dinner." Oh, the good old days of UJA dinners, right? Where they used to stand up, and we're not doing that tonight, I'm told. What attracted my parents to UJA was not only to work on poverty and the Jewish community, but it was also the drive of those involved and the urgency of folks to get off the sidelines and, as they like to say, get involved. My parents always believed in the power that a community can create, and they taught us that those who did not get into the game had very little to complain or right to do that. And getting into the game seems harder today than it may have ever been. We live in a time where all of us are staring at 5-inch screens instead of the world outside, at the global communities in need, at the increasing conflicts and the breakneck change. We hear about another glacier melting or a strongman taking power, and we say, what can we do? And I think that's the wrong question. I think the question is, what can we do? And the answer to that is what I want to chat about. As I was preparing my remarks tonight, I got swept up into the history of the UJA Federation. The UJA Federation has been the forefront of bringing people together to fight poverty, to care for the elderly, to respond to Christ, and strengthen Jewish life. The roots of the UJA now have been in existence, as we just saw in the video, for 100 years. The organization's very existence speaks to the message of common cause, the message of we. That in 1917, a small group of philanthropists saw the turbulence and mobilized to create change. And here we stand a century later, building on their decision to get into the game. What is each of us doing today that will stand the test of 100 years? I wish you go back to 1917 and tell Flex Warburg what his efforts and efforts of the community leaders would shape the lives of millions who would grow to become the world's largest local philanthropy. So, my friends, this is a time, as I say, to get into the game. The stakes are too high, the consequences are too great to simply sit on the sidelines and complain. So some of you may be thinking, now this is about the time when our speaker crosses the line and gets into politics. I made a promise. I will not cross that line, but I will get very close to it. Now, when I say all of us should get into the game, I'm not just talking about getting out there and supporting your favorite political candidate. Well, that's okay too, although it is very important. I'm talking about doing the kind of thing that my good friend Eric Grossman has done. Eric is a strong believer that we as Americans need more choices than just traditional two-party system between Democrats and independents. Or excuse me, Democrats and Republicans. That was a Freudian slip. So what did Eric do? Whew. He stopped complaining, got together with a bunch of his pals, and I'm sure some of you are in this room tonight, and launched a new political organization. And to be honest, Eric and I have had a few heated discussions about that. Shockingly, I don't believe that's what we need, as it just proved by my slip-up, as I happen to be very happy being labeled as a liberal Democrat. That being said, Eric is getting into the game. He is doing something, and he's getting off the sidelines. Now, some people believe it doesn't matter. They say the game is rigged. I say to those people, that is ridiculous. Sure, our system isn't perfect, but it was built to be imperfect. That's the genius. How could a system be perfect when it encourages everyone to have a voice? Hey, it's our system wasn't so good. Why would there be so many people around the world trying to stop us from spreading our values? Using your voice matters. Taking action matters. Voting matters. When people say my vote doesn't matter, I like to tell them a little story. As you heard, I've spent time working both in politics and on Wall Street, and I've been very lucky to do both. In 2000, I was honored to be the campaign manager for the first Jewish vice presidential candidate, Joe Lieberman, who, as you may recall, ran with Al Gore. Many of you should also remember what happened that night. The election was determined by less than 500 votes, 500 hanging chads in Palm Beach County. Did any of us even have heard of a hanging chad before 2000? I happened to be with the Vice President Gore and Senator Lieberman that election night. I can remember sitting in the hotel room with Gore and Lieberman and a handful of staff when Gore's picture pops up on the screen. The next 43rd President of the United States, Al Gore. I turned to Lieberman, as I'm never one to let a dramatic moment go unanswered, and I said, "Let me be the first to call you Mr. Vice President." Well, that didn't last very long. Our friends at Fox said, "Not so fast." Florida was called back and moved into the too close to call category. A few hours later, their networks declared that Bush had in fact carried Florida, and George Bush was now being called the next president of the United States. I remember as Gore left our room to go call Governor Bush and concede, I said to myself, this really can't be happening. But it gets even better. We're all on our way to an outdoor stadium where thousands of people have been waiting in the rain when we received the call in the car. Don't concede, don't give that speech. It's too close to call. That, my friends, was the beginning of 36 days of hell, which finally ended with the Supreme Court decision that ended the election by one vote. So for those of those who believe voting doesn't matter, Now fast forward to 2004, as John Kerry was running for president, he lost the election to President Bush by 2 points in Ohio, the same margin that it took. 2016. Hillary Clinton actually received 3 million more votes than President Trump, but 77,000 votes separated Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, changed the election. And we all know what happened then. Oops, now I'm getting close to the line, I'm sorry. Votes matters, folks. Getting in the game matters. It's about speaking up when issues of the day demand it. It's about the BDS movement catching on college campuses. Sure, some of us may disagree with the current leadership in Israel, and I may count myself as being part of that group. But I do not support sitting by and letting the boycott movement take hold, especially at a point in time when the anti-Semitism is on the rise. We need to make sure that we're educating our kids and our peers about the importance of Israel and about the importance of the Jewish state. We need to be in the game. It's about the refugee crisis in Syria. Since 2011, the war in Syria has taken well over 500,000 lives and has left more than 13 million people in need of aid. More than 5 million have fled Syria, and another 6 million have been internally displaced from their homes. Half of them are kids, and aid is limited. We have no choice but to get into that game with our views and, yes, with our checkbooks. It's about speaking out when a journalist gets murdered in an embassy in Turkey. It's about getting involved when human rights are being abused in countries who claim to be our ally. It's about being informed when your neighbor says climate change is a fake science. It's about knowing that 18 of the 19 warmest years on Earth have occurred since 2001, and that every major scientific organization in the world agrees. It's about realizing the United States is the only country in the world to have pulled out of the Paris Accord. It's about knowing that even if we haven't changed federal gun laws, 70% of Americans support stricter laws on assault weapons. It's remembering that a group of teenagers in Parkland got into the game and worked together to encourage more than 25 states to pass some form of gun violence legislation. It's about reminding people when they scream it's fake news, that the freedom of the press, the First Amendment, has served as the backbone of our democracy for centuries. Lastly, it's about realizing that people are coming together like never before through social movements. They're rallying by the hundreds of thousands for the Women's March, for March of Our Lives, for Rise of Climate, and many, many, many more. People say it doesn't matter and things don't change. Well, they do change, and it all starts from getting off the sidelines. We're in a reflective point in our country's history. We have a zillion people running for president. By the way, the candidates that have announced so far, 6 are women, 2 are African American. Regardless of who you support, Democrat, Republican, or Independent, people are getting involved. How great is that? So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the mission of the UJA. This has been the mission of the UJA for 100 years, to help people, to educate people, to get to people to understand. The UJA, who has been at the forefront of getting into the game, and it is for that reason I'm honored to be here tonight. Thank you very much.